Hello, good afternoon or good evening, and welcome to another edition of our live artist talks. My name is Ellen Hoobler. I am the William B. Ziff Jr. Associate Curator of the Art of the Americas here at the Walters Art Museum. And today I have the great pleasure of interviewing Baltimore-based artist René Treviño. René Treviño was born in Kingsville, Texas, and received his BFA in Fine Arts from the School of Visual Arts in New York and his MFA from our own local Maryland Institute College of Art, or MICA. His work has been exhibited at many museums and galleries, including the Wadsworth Atheneum in Hartford, Connecticut, the Baltimore Museum of Art, the Delaware Center for Contemporary Art, the Arlington Arts Center, and the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture. His work has been the recipient of numerous prizes. It was included in the 2007 WPA Corcoran Options Biennial in Washington, D.C. René has been awarded a 2009 Baltimore Creative Fund Individual Artist Grant and won the 2009 Trawick Prize. This year, 2021, René also won a Baker Artist Prize in the area of visual arts. On a more personal note, I've had the pleasure and honor to know René for about the past 3 years now, and I just want to highlight that what his resume does not convey is his graciousness and boundless creativity that spills into all areas of his life, and what he, much more than just his art, but his home, his person. He is just a font of creativity. I am continually impressed by his capacity to encompass both wonder and sheer brute tenaciousness and a great, incredible work ethic, all at the same time. So I'm really excited to talk to René tonight. We have the pleasure of speaking with René in the context of a new exhibition up at the Walters. The exhibition is Translations and Transitions, or Traducciones y Transiciones, a celebration of Mexican and Central American independence, 1821 to 2021. As you can see on screen, the exhibition will be open through November 7th of this year at the Walters, so we will be there for the celebration of independence on September 15th. I would love to welcome and invite everyone to come visit the show. We have labels both in English as well as available in Spanish via QR code or picking up a set of labels at the visitor services desk. So this show is not quite what you'd expect for a show commemorating independence. We don't have portraits of the heroes of conflicts. Rather, I designed this to be centered around 6 indigenous forms of knowledge that I think form a kind of part of the backbone of a really amazing core of indigenous culture and knowledge within the region. So those themes include things like indigenous languages, foodways, animals, mapping, deities, and most importantly for our talk tonight, astronomy. Many of you may be aware of the incredible sophistication of peoples of the Americas in creating pyramids that were aligned to different celestial phenomena, the movements of the sun, stars, etc. And if we can go back for just 1 second, this is a Maya incense burner or incensario from Mexico or Guatemala, which portrays the idea of the sun at night. So if we go forward 1 slide, what's fascinating about the ancient Americas is that we know so well that these were people who were incredibly sophisticated in their knowledge of the movements of the stars, but we know very little about how that information was transmitted across generations and from person to person. And that's really in contrast to European astronomers who were able to who created books like the one that we see on screen by James Bassantin of 1557 to communicate what they saw in the night sky, the constellations that they saw reflected. In the case of the Americas, many of those manuscripts, as we'll get into later, were destroyed, and so we don't have that same level of knowledge. But let's go ahead and go forward then. What I think is fabulous is that in this exhibition, we have a work of yours, Rene, on view that's entitled Reclaiming the Constellations, Jaguar. The work, in a way, riffs off of the Bassantan book and chart that we just saw, but was something that you'd created before this show's genesis, really. So the work is really particularly wonderful because I think everybody can enjoy it. On the one hand, it has these purely aesthetic qualities that make it extremely appealing. One colleague's son called this, quote, the best rainbow art in the museum, which is obviously true. But on the other hand, there are all of these deeper meanings to this work as well. Can you please help us walk the uninitiated viewer through some of your inspirations or motivations for creating this work?
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me. Just before we get started, if we could, I just want to say thank you to Sydney, Joy, you, Ellen, and to Paloma, and to the whole team at the Walters for having me. Thank you so much. Thank you for that compliment. I will take Best Rainbow at the Walters any day. All right, what's going on in this piece? This piece is part of a series. If we can go to the next image, please. It's part of a series called Reclaiming the Constellations. This is a piece that I completed, or this is a triptych that I completed in 2019. And I am thinking about color in a lot of different ways. In the piece that's at the Walters, you've got three kinds of rainbows going on. You've got that primary and secondary color rainbow that we all pretty much know and understand. You've got that neon rainbow with fluorescent colors. And then we've got a grayscale, which isn't technically a rainbow, but which I like to think of as a rainbow. If we can go to the next image, I can sort of talk through the process of how I got here. All right, so this is a project called Renaming the Constellations. And my husband and I bought this house here in downtown Baltimore like maybe 10, 11 years ago. And it's an old Victorian brownstone, right? And I think somehow that sort of Victorian kind of aesthetic has creeped into it's creeped into my life in a number of different ways. But one of the things that I was doing back in 2015, 2016 was researching a lot of Victorian, and by that I mean sort of like 1865 to maybe the early 1900s. I was researching a lot of Victorian star charts. So it's like those images that would be in the back of atlases. And God, I just love the cartography that was involved with those. I love the aesthetic of them. I mean, you'll see I'm sort of obsessed with round forms. And these, of course, all have that round form, the way that you would see space through a telescope, right? Yeah. But one of the things that I noticed when I was doing it is that, there were all these names for these constellations, like Cassiopeia or Andromeda or Perseus. And I was like, that's so weird because, I was looking at those Victorian star charts, but then I bought this stargazing book for my nephew and my brother-in-law. And it, was talking about constellations in a contemporary way, and they were still those names, right? And I was wondering why, why? They had names, clearly it's such a part of the human existence to look up, right? So they had names well before the names that, those Western names that we know. And then, we also know that we're such a blip in the grand scheme of the universe. And so, that they'll have names way after we're gone. And that kind of opened up and kind of freed me creatively to sort of change those names, to sort of rename them, and then in the more recent series to reclaim them. And if you can go to the next image, please. So here you've got a detail of one of those. I'm playing with different shades of red. I'm playing with removing certain language, kind of moving the constellations around also. I'm very aware with all those really beautiful images that are coming out of NASA about how so deep and vast space is. And I love that. And also the discovery of like a couple of planets that potentially could hold human life. They're thousands of light years away, so it won't affect you or I, Ellen, sadly. But it does sort of pose, I don't know, a kind of hopefulness or something. And so then it also freed me up to sort of think about what constellations might look like from other places. So I'm thinking about all those things when I'm constructing these. And then please, next image. And then also, replacing sometimes the language with glyphs, right? These are Miztec glyphs, and I just love them. So you've got the glyphs themselves, and you've also got the English translation. But yeah, so in sort of that series was called Renaming, and then renaming sort of became too small, and so then I wanted to reclaim, right? And one of the ideas there, of course, is also queering outer space, queering the universe. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what's so interesting about this is that, constellations are pretty arbitrary. People looked up at the sky, and depending on how you connect those stars, you can create any image you want. And so things that were important within the Mixtec culture of maybe 900 to 1500 or up till the present day in Mexico, would have been things like different animals that they named their different days for, the crocodile, the monkey, etc. So I love how you are going back to those stars. Let's go to the next slide. You're kind of going back to those stars. And one thing that people who are seeing this only on screen might miss is the texture and glitter to this work. No, let's go back, sorry. Due to the multiple kinds of rhinestones, from crystals to matte plastic gems to sequin-like appliques that are on its surface. So you were, in a way, inserting your own stars, which is what I really love. It's also hand-painted, like many of your other paintings, which might, things that might at first appear to be digitally printed or screen printed are actually hand-painted. Given that your work is so often hand-painted and extremely intricate, can you talk about either three-dimensionality or labor in your practice?
Absolutely. God, rhinestones. I can't get away from them. I think it's partly because I grew up in South Texas. So I was starved for glamour, and I would take it anywhere I could get it. And one of the places that I would get it is the craft store, right? Because my grandmothers both sewed and my mother sews. And so we would find ourselves at the craft store very often, and I would always beeline straight to the bead aisle and the rhinestone aisle. And, you could buy those little packs, and they were kind of, like I could just hoard them and play with them. And just like that magpie sensibility, I think, just really loving that sparkle thing. And in this composition, you see the black jaguar that you see is not actually, it is painted, but then it's densely covered with Swarovski crystals, kind of fancy Swarovski crystals. But then there's the high-low there where you've got the constellations, and the stars in the constellation are these just, they are from the craft store. But I loved them, and it kind of made me nervous to put them on this composition. But at the end of the day, I really like that sort of pop of plasticky, kind of artificial neon color, which I think kind of goes well with the plasticky, kind of texture surface of acrylic paint as well. And then, to speak to the labor part, if we can go to the next image, please. This is the series I made in 2019. It's the very last piece I made in 2019. I literally finished it on December 31st, 2019. And, I'm thinking about the changeable qualities of the moon. I'm thinking of like Strawberry Moon that we had recently. I'm thinking of the blood moon that we had a few years ago, also the blue moon that's kind of ubiquitous in popular culture. And so I'm thinking about that. If we can go to the next image. And so this isn't part of that series. This is an earlier moon, but I think it sort of illustrates the point. So here, from far away, I think you sort of see that it is really tight, right? It's really precise. I'm being very precise about the way that I paint. I've sort of developed this kind of way of painting over the years, and it is remarkably precise. And I think from far away, a lot of times people do think it's a silk screen or a digital print or something like that. But if you can go to the next image, please. But in fact, this is about a 3 by 5 inch detail. And I think if you get up really close to these paintings, you see that there's a looseness there. There's also a handmade quality here. You don't see it from far away, but you do see it when you get up close. And you can see that sometimes the paint is thicker, sometimes the paint is thinner. You can see the metallic surface of the paint here that you couldn't see in that sort of big image. And I've had folks who have thought that like meditation is somehow part of my practice, and like that I find on making these paintings that really are labor intensive and time consuming, that I find that meditative in some way. And I will say that that is not in fact the case. I think about, again, my grandparents, my parents, and they really modeled for us really hard work. My mom is one of 11 kids. My dad is one of 3 kids, but his father died. My grandfather died when he was 13. So my grandmother was a single parent for a big chunk of his life. And they literally had to work so hard to raise themselves from poverty to middle class, right? And that doesn't happen. That certainly doesn't happen for brown people just, by accident. That's literally the result of a lot of really hard work. And so then I find myself sort of the beneficiary of that hard work to a certain extent. But I also find that, with that behavior that they modeled for me, that it's definitely come across in my practice, right? Like I just always have to sort of keep my hands busy. That sort of labor is kind of baked in to every brushstroke, right? It's the way that I think. It's kind of the way that I compose images.
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking about when I started this off by talking a little bit about your tenacity, because I feel like you're always working on something, and often several things at once, and it's just so incredible. But there's actually the physical hands-on work, but there's also so much other work that goes into your art as well. Some of it has to do with research. And I'm really pleased and proud that we've been able to, in some ways, work with you to facilitate research at times. Can you tell me a little bit about how the Walters has been a source of inspiration for your work? And maybe let's go to the next slide to just take a look at that. Yeah. Absolutely.
So this is a piece also from 2019. I think you can see the optimism in this piece. This is before everything crazy happened. Okay, so what you see here is 15 paintings. They're 18 by 18 each, 18 by 18 inches each. You see things like a calendar stone, but also like the Aztec calendar stone. You see that circular skull form, which is from Chichen Itza. You see stars, you see the moon, right? So things that sort of occurred in my work prior to this that have come out of research. But like, I don't know, there's something about that, like we're on this really big round form, right? Surrounded by, and we're orbiting this other big round form, the sun. And we're surrounded by all these round forms. So this round form is really powerful. And all different kinds of cultures use it, all different kinds of designers use it, right? And I just find it so powerful. And I think it kind of points to our connectivity. I think we're very like tied to like, I don't know, this current sort of political climate sort of makes us think a lot of times about our differences. But I actually think that there's so much more that unites us. So I like to kind of focus on that. But yeah, so, out of my research, this was the first 15 of this series, but if we can go to the next image. It now includes these 2 paintings, which are more recent. And these 2 paintings were straight up inspired by objects that you have in the collection of the Walters. I love the Walters for so many reasons. It was one of the first museums I visited when I came to Baltimore, and I've been in Baltimore 17 years. I was here for the first cicada season, and here I am for the next one. And then, I also love that the Walters put so much of their collection online, right? So that they've got these really great, high quality, high resolution images. You can see the front of the object. You can also see the back of the object or the side of the object. So I really think that that's so generous. And so here you see, if you see the next image, you see these are directly inspired by these vessels. I'll also say, Ellen, just because, you've been such a source of inspiration, right? Like our conversations, I think, have been really inspiring and have really helped feed the work. So I'm really grateful for that.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That is really kind of you, because I really feel like I'm always just waiting and watching to see what like new brilliant thing you're going to do next. And so it's been great to to get to know you a little bit in the past few years. And you've done so much research on your own. So if we were to go on to the next slide, so you've kind of, on the one hand, engaged with actual works that are sometimes in the Walters collection, but you've also been doing, more book and archival research, and then actually been inspired by travel, observing, monuments of pre-Columbian and indigenous cultures, especially looking at the codices, those few surviving 16th century manuscripts that were made by indigenous peoples, namely, especially the Maya, Aztec, and Mixtec peoples, among others. Tell me a little bit about this piece, Jaguar, and how you seek and follow inspiration from those manuscripts.
Those manuscripts have such power for me, I think because there are so few left, right? There's so few left. They were systematically destroyed by the Spanish during the conquest or during colonization, during that whole process. And so that leaves the ones that are remaining, less than 20, I think, in the whole world. And that gives them such power to me. Like, I love them. And I do find them sort of a constant, endless source of inspiration. You turn the pages of those books. I haven't actually seen a real one. I've only seen reproductions, and a lot of them are available online. There's also, you can buy facsimiles. But I love them. They're so dense too. Like, there's so much imagery on each individual pages, and that's like glyphs. It's belief system. It's family lineage. It's talking about wars and battles. It's also talking about the spoils of war. It's also talking about some of their rituals and beliefs. I just love those manuscripts, but they really are dense. And a lot of them were done on paper, but a lot of them, because they did have paper technology, but a lot of them were also done on skins, like on deer skin. And so I was thinking about like how I could make that sort of more contemporary, how I could think about that. And I've always just loved these leather skins, like I think back to the rhinestones. I just love that kind of hot reflective surface. And this leather is foiled and it's super reflective. You can't quite see that in the image, but in real life, this piece is really shiny. And I'm thinking about them also as kind of like these shrines. So in that first image, you saw the jaguar. Here you see, it's fine. Here you see the birds, or a bird. This is also so weird because I'm used to rectangles, like you saw in all those previous works. They're all perfect squares, actually. I think all the work that we saw. But I like those sort of rectilinear forms, and that's really kind of the way my brain works. But then these leather pieces came, and I had tried originally to cut the leather into squares or rectangles, and something was lost in that process. So now I get these skins directly like this from the tanner, and I just put them up on my studio wall, and I just live with the shape for a while. And like with the other work, also the rectilinear work, like very often I know exactly what that piece is going to look like at the very beginning. And then it's just about doing all that work to sort of make it to the finish line. But with these, I have no idea what they're going to look like at the beginning. So it's a process of sort of like putting up the leather, then sort of thinking about what the next step is, and then assessing and thinking about what the next step is. But then, of course, those codex images sort of come through. And so these are like small little things that would be in those really big, complicated pages that I can then isolate and I can sort of give more attention to. If we can go to the next image. So this is humanity, right? And you sort of see, like in the first image, you saw the jaguar. In the second image, you saw the bird. And here you've got this skull, this very human skull. But it's having devoured that bird, having devoured the jaguar. And yeah, it's not a living, this isn't a living face. This is a living profile. This is a skull, right? So there's death there too. I also just love making these because I like that sort of idea of those ideas that are really old. So working with these, like you said, 16th century manuscripts, but then also putting in some contemporary ideas. So if you look, all the different claw nails on all of these forms, have super blinged out manicures. I like sort of bringing in the sort of contemporary things, the rhinestones and all the different appliques. Yeah, I'm just having a ton of fun making these things. I love those codices also because we know a lot about them, but we also just don't know a lot, right? And I think that's really ripe for artistic intervention.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of them seem straightforward, but then there'll be some detail that you can unpack it almost infinitely in terms of what it's communicating, either on a glyphic level or on a pictorial level. Well, this is really exciting to see this current work, even if your view of humanity in 2021 is a little bit dark right now. I think we're all in a maybe we're hopefully coming out of a darker phase. I certainly hope that we will be showing your work again at the Walters sometime soon. But apart from the museum, where will people be able to see your work in the next few months? And what are your current and upcoming projects?
Absolutely. A couple things. You know, I teach, so I have 3 more weeks left in the semester, which I'm psyched about. And then I've got a lovely summer to work on some projects. But in terms of exhibitions, I've got an exhibit coming up at the Knockdown Center in Queens. Curator Tanya Gayer has put together an exhibit of, I believe there's 10, maybe 12 Latinx artists. And we're coming to Queens and we're taking over that Knockdown Center, and it's going to be really amazing. That exhibit was supposed to happen last summer and it was postponed. So I'm really excited for that to actually happen. This thing that we've been thinking about and planning for a really long time is happening. And then just down the street from you at the C. Grimaldi Gallery, I'll be having an exhibit that opens in November, mid-November there. And so there'll be this like magic moment in November where you could theoretically go to the Walters to see this exhibit and then go to Grimaldis and see that exhibit. Hopefully you see this exhibit before then though, because I think the things and the themes that you've brought forward are really thoughtful, and the objects that are on display are really beautiful. And so you should see it multiple times.
Well, thank you. Yes, everybody is very cordially invited to come to see this show and to see Rene's work within it. We're really excited. I think we're going to shift gears now. We have at least a couple minutes, and maybe we'll just take a few extra minutes to see if people have questions for you. I see that right away, one of our docents, Jan Thorman, has a great question about the flowers in the work Jaguar of 2021 on the skin. He says, I love the flowers in the Jaguar. Can you talk about why you decided to include these flowers along with the Jaguar and stars? And you're sitting behind a bunch of roses today, so yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely think about roses are, I don't know if that's in my head for like when I think of flowers. I think roses is one of the first images that I think of. Why did I choose those? It's so interesting. Again, the process of making those is, I don't have a concrete plan in the beginning, really. So it's really just this thing of like, I add and then I take away, and sort of see what works and sort of assess. But those flowers are like these, it's this embroidered lace that I order. I also go to craft stores. I go to trim stores. I go to fabric stores all the time. Like, that's just part of my process, right? That sort of accumulation. You see the sort of cute part of my studio right now, but if I turn the camera, which I'm not going to, you would see a little bit more chaos, and you would see that there's a lot of stuff in here, a lot of accumulation here. And so it's it's just then when I need something in the composition, I just go to the things that I've collected and I pull out things and I pull out options, and then it's sort of like a trial and error thing. And then once I find something that I love or works really well in one piece, then perhaps I'll incorporate that in future pieces. But I'm also I am thinking about those as shrines, right? And I think of really beautiful. Like I grew up in South Texas, I said before, but I also grew up Catholic. So like I think that kind of idea of Catholic art and architecture is just like in my head, and so I'm thinking very much of those like niches that have the icon in the middle, and then you have the all the flowers and the candles very often. Like, I don't know, that I think that's in that work for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yes, flowers as being another kind of continuum. One way that, in the early colonial or viceregal period, that people, that Spanish, friars could kind of draw links, was that Indigenous peoples had been using flowers in the past and continued to use flowers in Catholic practice as well. I think we're going to go now to a question or comment from Sophonisba writing into us. Could you go back to your constellations and talk more about your choices? This is such a compelling approach. And I think it's a moment where I was so excited to include this work in the show, because the show is all about survival, cultural survival, and in fact, not just survival, but thriving in the face of difficult things. And so I love that this is reclaiming the constellations. Maybe we can, or let's talk about, I'd love to hear more about your choices in reclaiming the constellations.
Sure. I kind of think of both of those series kind of as similar because they happened, it's part of the same brain space. So I'm thinking of those 6 constellations that I showed, the ones that have, the red, orange, yellow, the rainbow stripe of those constellations. And I kind of approached each one of them distinctly. So like if you looked really close at that green one, I didn't have a detail of the green one, but it is on my website. So you can go to the website and see the green one more closely. But that was actually the first one that I made. And so in that one, from that series, I had painted other star charts, but this was the first time that I was like, you know what, I'm going to mess with this. I'm going to mess with it. So the first way that I messed with it was, I was like, well, why am I writing Andromeda's name? I don't remember that it was Andromeda, but, why am I writing this weird Greek name? So I think, I put my cats in first. I put my sweet, at the time I had 3 cats. So I put Nacho and Pedro and Shaka Khan in amongst these constellations. I think I put my husband Paul in there. And so you'll see some names that are from, in that green painting, that's the transition. You'll see some names that are from, the Greek mythos, but you'll see other names that are, personal to me. And then each one of those 6 paintings sort of has a different strategy. So some of, like the yellow one is old, Miztec or Mayan or Aztec sites, cities, old cities. The names of those cities. The purple one, the last one in the series, that was the last one that I made. That one is so interesting. So at the top, it's got a headstone, and at the bottom, it's got a headstone. And that's really personal. That's a really personal one to me. So it says Trevino on the top one, and then it says Trevino, or it says Soto at the bottom, which is my mom's maiden name. So it's both of those. My brother died many, many years ago. And so we always go to visit. Anytime I'm in Texas, we go to visit that cemetery where he's buried. And also my parents are such planners. So they've already bought their headstones. They're both still with us, but they're both, so anyway, so in that last painting, you'll sort of see all the names from that cemetery. It's the cemetery in Edroy, Texas. And in that, you'll see all the names that I see when I go visit my brother, and also, where my parents will be buried in the future. But it's so interesting, that headstone with your parents' name on it, and it's got the birth date, but it doesn't have the death date yet, and it's so weird and creepy to see. But bless them for planning, right? It's one less thing I have to take care of, right?
Bless them for planning. I guess this has been a year of a lot of people wishing maybe that there was more planning, but also not wanting to engage with that. But it also, I think, speaks again to them as like really hard workers and to people who are constantly working. And our own Joy Davis asks, you both mentioned labor in your work. How does the conversation around labor factor into your work?
Yeah, it's my favorite thing to do, right? Is to be busy in the studio and to sort of feel creative. And when there's those stretches of time when I can't do I literally, it makes me go crazy. it literally, it does. I really love the process of sitting here in my studio and making things and making decisions and making all these paintings that are, like I said, they're hard to make, they're time consuming, but it is still my favorite thing to do. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I feel really lucky that I can do it, right? I feel really lucky and fortunate that I'm able to do it. And it, and so on the one hand, it's, but it's also that thing, like where you find the thing that you love to do and then you do it, right? And,
we should all aspire to that, yes.
Yeah.
No, and it's so amazing because you're always teaching as well as creating, and then, I not to keep personalizing, but yeah, your house is incredible as well, and you have this full family, and you just seem to be, you are just incredibly hardworking, and it's amazing.
Oh,
it's just amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, I don't know. I don't see any more questions right now. I guess I would say that as you were talking about the skins and the shape of the skins, I was thinking about, all of the different possible conversations we actually could have had for this talk. I mean, when we talked about this privately, we talked about the idea of just like, really nitty gritty formalism and art historical lore, and like the idea of the drip in your painting and the handmadeness and removing of the hand. And then I just love that for the skins, which we actually see behind you. So I feel like there's so many conversations we could have had.
Yeah, these are works in progress behind me. And they're very early on. These were weird brown leather skins. I really did love them when I bought them at the tanner, but when I got them home, I've had them for like 3 or 4 years. They were this kind of weird brown color, which is not really what I'm about. So then I thought, well, why don't I paint them this amazing yellow that's really one of my favorite colors. This, I think the paint itself is called Senegal yellow. And so I painted them that yellow. I added the leopard myself, and then I'm working on them, and I'm kind of working on the 3 of them all at once. I think it will actually be a triptych where the 3 of them sort of function as one.
Ooh.
But we'll see, and I've been collecting things. I just made an order for some things that might go into the final composition, but I ordered those things from China, so they'll take a while to get here. But yeah, those are works in progress, and a lot of other things are
Yeah, it really makes me think about our globalized world, and just it's such a fascinating topic, and looking forward to seeing those works completed, and hopefully having much more of your work on view at the Walters in the future. Yeah, I guess let's wrap things up here before we get an onslaught of more questions. I want to thank René Treviño so much for being here with us today. A big thank you as well to Sydney, Joy, Paloma, and the whole digital team for playing assist in this program. And a bigger thank you to you, the audience, for sharing in this experience with us. We look forward to welcoming you back for more programs on our social platforms. And in terms of the Translations and Transitions exhibit, we will be having much more programming upcoming for this exhibit. So please stay tuned and keep watch on the website for upcoming programs. Goodbye for now, and thank you so much, René.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the Walters. Amazing.